I'm Kashish, your host for today. Just a one-liner introduction about me. I am from the same fraternity as almost all of you, and I have 14 years of experience in the HR function. So I am thankful to the entire core HIR group for giving me this privilege to be on this platform, which is one of the best initiatives taken up by the team. And this initiative is the result of a noble chain of thoughts to invite ideas, views, experience, and expertise on various HR topics or matters which are coming up recently and have been a matter of concern for the businesses as well as the HR function. So as human resources, we come across a lot of issues, a lot of organizational issues in the corporate life. And I think one of the glaring issues that we face today is the retention. The average duration that we nowadays see uh, being served by the talent in the organizations is anywhere from 2 to at max 3 or 4 years. Unfortunately, the trend is on the downslide, and the average is slowly reducing to about 2 years. Some of us owe it to the millennial generation, some of us owe it to the fast changing corporate environment, some of us feel that maybe the companies are not doing enough to retain talent, or the HR is not being good enough in identifying the talent uh, in the organization and giving them their due, and hence talent is always on the lookout for the next good opportunity they feel. And in the same direction, we are hosting today's webinar. The topic is Talent Recession is a direct outcome of talent disengagement and absence of talent succession or succession plan. And the thought speaker for today is Adil Malia. He is currently the CEO of the firm. So I would like to give a brief introduction about Adil Malia, who's currently the CEO of the firm. It is very difficult right now to say to talk about him in less words, but we'll try to keep it short and simple for the benefit of for the attendees of the webinar. So Adil started his management consulting company along with two of his industry veteran colleagues, Firdaus Vandrewala and Robin Banerjee. The company actually works with reputed corporations in the areas of business excellence, value creating efficiencies, business turnarounds, financial re-architecting, organizational transformation, and cultural flexibilities, strategic human resources management, as well as leadership coaching. Atul began his career at 19 years of age as a legal assistant, and prior to setting up his current organization, the firm, he was the group president HR of SR Group. He's worked in his career with reputed multinational companies like Coca-Cola, Marks and Spencer, GE Appliances, and Indian companies like Godrej and SR. So he has been involved in coaching several top CEOs. The versatile business leader that he is, he has noteworthy experiences in the domains of people management, change management, strategic human resources, coaching, and leadership development. Adu strongly believes that organizations succeed in enchanting market times only if they're agile, they drive passionately, adopt disruptive innovation, and become a lifelong learning organization. He is a voracious reader of management literature, a sought after keynote speaker at national and international professional forums. He is also an active contributor of his thought leadership through his articles in media and actively drives thought leadership in social media as well. Apart from that, he's also a certified trainer, has designed experiences based learning journeys for several reputed companies in India and overseas. He's passionate about organization capability and people advocate. His colleagues have endorsed him on social media and have actually said that he is the rarest of the rare transformational leaders in the industry. They believe that Dr. Malia has a very unique, extremely creative, and has developed very interesting ways of instilling leadership qualities in his mentees. Yes, he's a doctor. So the degree of PhD in philosophy was honored to him by the Chikara University, which is actually called causa honoris in the technical terminology. But outside of that, he has a bachelor's degree in commerce, a bachelor's degree in law, and a master's degree in personnel management and industrial relations from prestigious Tata Institute of Social Sciences. He's also done the Coca-Cola Wharton Advanced Management Program. He indulges in Fabian doodling, plays the Mohan Veena, and loves classical music. Anybody who wishes to find out more information or more about the company can visit him on the website adilmalia.com, which is ADILMALIA.com. So for the benefit of the attendees now, I'll be sharing the flow of the webinar. So we would, having done with the introduction, I would be engaging Adil on a conversation based on the different different concerns or different challenges being faced by the industry veterans or even the industry professionals, the HR professionals. We'll go step by step. So I would like to welcome him onto the platform. Please join me in extending a warm welcome. Welcome, Adil. How are you doing today?
I'm doing extremely well, thank you. And how about you?
I'm doing very well, sir. I hope I'll feel better after you having joined us. Gives me some confidence that somebody is there on this platform while you're talking to the attendees. So
thank you for such an elaborate introduction.
Right. Thank you so much for sparing some of your valuable time, which out of which I think more than 5 minutes were already wasted with a long pause. But then we'll try to cope up with that. So I think one of the main questions that would come across everybody's mind would be, why is retaining and managing talent always a matter of great challenge for any organization? It's a very small thing, but then it is still very complicated. So why is it such a great challenge?
So thank you very much, Kashish, for the question. And good evening to you, all my dear friends who are joining in for this webinar, particularly Veer, Kashish, and the core HR team for inviting me to do this. There are certain doodles, and I keep doodling a lot, so which are going to be on your screen. And I'm going to take assistance of these doodles to be able to answer your very detailed questions, specific ones that you'll be asking me. Now, what is the quintessence of the theme that we are trying to drive today in this evening's session? The most important message that I want to be really communicating is that talent is the raw stock from which value is created in an enterprise. And for this raw stock to be able to contribute real value to the enterprise, two things need to get done. Talent needs to be aligned and connected. And secondly, talent needs to be engaged. It is only when these two conditions are prevalent can talent actually contribute value to the enterprise. Just having talent in your organization does not deliver nothing to the company. Now, when talent is disconnected or when talent is disengaged, the raw potential that the talent brings to the enterprise would tend to be wasted. And when talent realizes that it is getting wasted in the enterprise, it tends to attrite. Few people leave the company. And then over a period of time, seeing them leave the company, many people start leaving the company, and therefore the talent recedes the enterprise. Receding talent, despite fantastic business plans, investments, opportunities, and everything else, cannot create the exponential value when talent recedes from the enterprise. And that is one of the most important messages. The message is that having talent by itself is not good enough. It needs to be connected and engaged to create value. That is one of the most important messages. Now look at the doodle. What are we trying to say? The message that we are trying to give you is, look at the right-hand corner of the doodle. There are these two guys who are constantly the outsiders and who are mapping the most talented people in your enterprise. Don't be too shocked, because I'll tell you what, the most high-performing people and talent in your organization, or the high-potential people who even you may not know, are actually tapped and identified by your competitor. Talent is a high-demand commodity in the hypermarket of people. It's a very, very high demand hypermarket, a high demanded market, and therefore people, or talent in particular, is in high demand in that market. Now, organizations are vulnerable to talent attacks. So whenever people in other company or your headhunters will identify that there is talent lying in your company, organizations tend to become very vulnerable to talent attacks. Their high performing cutting edge talent is always on the competitor's talent watch list. And therefore, two things very critically if you want to be successful. Number one is you got to be mindful of the fact that you take care of these people who otherwise your competitor is too eager to take care of. And number two is constantly in the market, don't be Rip Van Winkle who goes to sleep. Be able to identify where the competitor's talent is lying so that you are able to focus on that. And that's one of the most important things. So does this tell you that talent is the one that creates value? It's the raw stock that creates value. By itself, it cannot do nothing. It can do only when talent is engaged and connected. And unless and until you take care of your people by creating better engagement and better connection, competitor would be too eager to look at them, and then you will have a talent attrition. Talent attrition will lead to talent recession, and once you have talent recession, you cannot create value. And therefore, that is the great important challenge that organizations face. Does this make sense?
Absolutely, sir. Thank you so much for elaborating on it. I think what the audience or the attendees would have the question in mind is, what exactly is talent and how would one differentiate it from people resources? Do the two mean the same? And does one see these two terms often being used interchangeably? So what is your thought?
So, Kashish, my view is very simple, and I generally believe, and over the period of the last, around 3 decades of my experience dealing with human resources in corporations, one of the biggest mistakes that most HR professionals do is to mix up the two terminologies. They use it interchangeably. We began with personnel management, came into human resources management. We have now re-christianed this as talent management. So predominantly we mean that by just changing the nomenclature by which we address them, we are dealing with the same raw stock. And that is the first error that we are making. The fact is that the two are totally different. Though of course they are, one is the universe and the other is the subsection or the subpart of it. And the capacity they have to blend with each other is very, very high. Talent, according to me, is actually the subsection of the universe called people. Not all people in your organization are talent, but a certain category of people who meet certain performance expectations and standards and who have the ability to create influence, they are the ones who are actually called talent. And that is why the two are different. Now, in hyper-competitive markets, organization needs cutting-edge talent. But cutting-edge talent is generally very difficult to get because it's very costly and it needs to be maintained at all points of time. So how much of that cutting-edge talent you want to bring in is a function of what is the cost-benefit analysis. How much are you willing to pay for the high-cost talent and what is the benefit you are able to get? And that is the decider. So there is no cookie cutter formula anyone else. How much of talent do you want in an organization? It's a function of how much is the cost of retaining the talent and maintaining the talent. And at the same time, what is the benefit they bring in? Now look at the screen definition of what according to us is talent. So talent is that people resource which given the same culture, resource and ecosystem. So talent and people are provided the same things. All right. So they are given the same culture, they are given the same resources, they are given the same ecosystem, and despite being given the same thing, talent is able to contribute exponentially different and higher value to the enterprise. Not only that, but they are also able to create a positive environment. So sometimes you get people in the organization who are able to create and contribute exponentially different and higher value, but the noise they make and the kind of negativity they spread in the organization is terrible. Now, would you want to consider that as a talent of your enterprise? So the classical definition, and for this kind of a differentiation between talent and people management, you will have to use the scalpel of a surgeon and not the knife of a butcher to be able to understand the difference, because talent does two things. It creates exponential value despite of being provided the same resources, same culture, same ecosystem. And alongside doing that, it is able to create a positive environment and build more leaders into the organization because of its positivity. And when they do both these things, then that's the talent that you're looking for in the organization. So the short answer to the long explanation I gave is, people is the universe, talent is the subsection of it. Talent is the one that really contributes exponential value, and therefore talent is very, very important to have in the enterprise.
Absolutely. So does that mean talent wants a differentiated treatment from the rest of the people in the company?
Well, of course, talent realizes its value, and therefore talent will expect a differentiated value. Now, let us look at what talent really expects. So, if you really ask me, what does talent really want in the organization? I would say talent needs three things in an organization to be able to create value. Number one is, talent really requires a positive work environment. What does it expect? It expects apolitical leadership. It expects to work in an organization where the company it works for, the external recognition of the brand is very high. It expects that there is a certain clean governance in the enterprise, and that's very, very important, because if it is a high performing talent, it certainly wants to be associated with a brand which has got a high value. It certainly wants to work in an enterprise which has flexible, non-restraining culture, which is a facilitative culture rather than a debilitating culture. And it expects an appropriate degree of automation and developmental initiatives, so that it feels that the work tools that are required for talent to be able to contribute value, those are provided. And these are the positive work environment. So when you're talking about positive work citizenship, one of the critical elements of what talent really expects is a positive work environment. Now, once it is provided as a hygiene factor of positive work environment, and that's a hygiene factor because if it is not there, people will attract purely because of that, nothing else. Now, there are two other critical elements that talent expects. Number one is, talent expects to be aligned and connected with the strategy. This is very important because most organizations and most HR managers, and I've seen tons of these presentations on engagement and how engagement needs to be enhanced. One of the most important thing is that engagement is critical, and yes, we will talk about engagement being critical, but another factor which is very, very important is called employee connection. So employee alignment and connection, and that alignment and connection is with the strategy of the company. What does it mean? It means alignment with the purpose, participation in the strategy of the organization. So if organization is making a business strategy and people and talent are saying you only execute, you are not supposed to be participating in the making of the strategy, then people will feel disconnected. Or we are planning for this, you come and do what we tell you to do. Well, involvement in planning is very important to people. They need to feel that they are involved in the success of the organization. So if you don't involve them in planning, they're going to be disconnected. Times out of number, people tell us that we learn about what our organization is doing after reading newspaper reports. But within our organization, no one tells us what our own company is doing. We feel alienated despite of being told that we are talented people in the organization. So therefore, communicating the larger enterprise performance is very, very important for the talent and the people to feel connected with the strategy of the enterprise. And unless and until, if you are being treated as talent, unless and until you're really involved in solving the larger problems, not only the problems which are limited to the function and the role you are performing, but you are told that, okay, look, we are facing this larger challenge and we are going to put you as a part of the cross-functional team because this is a larger problem, which is a life-threatening problem to the enterprise. Come together and solve it. Then the connection of the employee or the talent that we are talking about with the larger enterprise is very strong. So talent requires positive work environment. At the same time, talent requires a certain connection with the strategy. So that's the second element of what the talent expects of the organization and people. And third, of course, the most important thing is a meaningful engagement in the authentic value creation journey that the organization goes through. So it wants that there is a value creation journey every organization, and I'll take you in a minute's time to what we mean by the value to value journey of the enterprise. That particular value creation journey of the enterprise, he expects that that should enhance his knowledge, because certainly I am not at the ultimate end of my career. I want to see an opportunity to build my knowledge, to build my capability, to enhance my economic well-being, because of course I'm working with an intention to enhance my economic well-being. So I want that when I work for the organization and I'm building my capability, I'm enhancing my knowledge, my economic well-being is being managed. At the same time, my association is also building my own brand. My peers in the field are recognizing the fact that I'm working for a great organization, and this knowledge is building my own brand. And my career therefore grows within the enterprise, or what I am doing within the company certainly is valued outside, such that when I ever step out, if I need to, then my career will certainly be in the right trajectory. So if you see what overall talent really expects, because it says that, look, if I'm adding exponential value to your enterprise's value creation journey, then I can do it in a positive work environment, provided I am connected and aligned to the strategy of the enterprise, and I meaningfully engage in the authentic value creation journey of the enterprise. So these are the three things that talent expects. Now, when talent knows that it is different than the general public, it certainly has an expectation of differentiated training. Times out of number, people at writing from an enterprise come and tell me, you know what, after I submitted my organization tells me that I am a valued resource of the organization only after I submit my resignation letter. Now that's very funny. What happened? You never communicated. You thought he's a talented guy all across, and suddenly only when he decided to resign from your company, you realize that he's a talented resource that is going away. And that's exactly what goes wrong. So talent, genuinely, if you believe, is the talent of the enterprise. Talent expects identification. Talent expects recognition. Talent expects differentiated treatment. And talent attrites when it is not recognized or is not treated differentially in an enterprise. Now, the larger question therefore comes is, do we socialize the talent and the offerings in the company, or do we differentiate? Now, of course, there is a logic to socializing and things like that, and which is also important. But talent retention, as we are talking limitedly of the subject, and we will have to learn to manage the balance between socialization and differentiation. But from a talent retention perspective, differentiation is very critical. And that's what I feel is the Hello.
Hello.
Hi, Kashish. That's. Did you get me?
Right. I think I lost you for a minute in between, and hence, right. So we've gone through several of your articles, and you've constantly spoken about talent management. So, and you've been talking about two critical life-breathing talent management processes, which are very, very popular. First one being value creating parts, and second one being positively aligned talent life cycle. So for our benefit, would you please explain these two concepts?
Sure. In fact, I have written extensively on this. Let me put it on the screen what my thoughts are that will explain to you. So every organization's talent creation processes are based on two life-breathing organizational talent processes. One is, let's come to a conclusion. Why is talent critical? Why should an organization talent? See, remember one thing, talent is like that cutting edge of the enterprise. Like a knife has 95% spreading edge, 5% of talent is like the cutting edge. And as in a knife, you require the spreading edge, you also require the cutting edge, because oftentimes you want to do the spreading part of it, but some part of it which needs to be cutting should be sharp enough at all points of time. And why does it need to be sharp enough? Because as compared to people, talent has that unique ability to spot opportunities and efficiently process it through its value creation journey. So its ability to spot opportunities, its ability to convert that opportunities into sales, its ability to convert sales into margin plus revenues, its ability to convert that revenue into profits. Talent has, as compared to the rest of the organization, the talented people in the organization have the ability to do this more in the enterprise. So therefore, its value creating path is very, very important, and you need to understand what are the value creating parts of the, what is the value to value journey that we are talking about. Now, when you're talking about these value creating paths, these value creating paths are not necessarily only in the sales organization. So there are 5 or 6, in fact, rather 6 value creating journeys of an enterprise. And every organization has this unique value to value journey that it takes on. So number 1 is, of course, the values nurtured, because that is where the organization defines and says, whilst we want to continue to make economic value, there are certain behavioral values that we nurture. And unless and until you reflect those behaviors, we don't want to really indulge in value creation at any cost. So these are the values nurtured, and talent reflects the values nurtured as made known by the organization. So organizations announce what are the values that they subscribe to, and talent reflects that value, and that's the first value that the organizational journey begins with. The second is talent, and talent's ability to create customer value is very high. So the customer value delivered by talent is very high, and therefore that is the path that needs to be focused on. The third is its ability to, despite of whatever it is, the entire value chain efficiency. So in whichever part of the value chain talent works, its ability to create efficiency in that part of the value chain is very, very high. The third is its ability to fulfill or to extract value from the supplier value chain, and that's very, very high. So its ability to negotiate with the suppliers to get a better rate, better quality, better time, so that a better product is being made is very, very high, and that's the other value path that it follows. The fifth is the kind of values that it delivers to the other stakeholders. So how does it manage the environment? How does it manage the neighborhood? How does it manage the government? So all the other stakeholders, and therefore ability of talent to focus on and create better value for the stakeholder fulfillment of value is very, very high. And the last is for the shareholder, talent is able to create a much better monetizable value as compared to the general people in the enterprise. So therefore, linking talent to the value creation journey is very, very important, because cutting edge talent has unique ability to contribute to exponential value once it is connected to the strategy and is engaged to the process. And that is one of the most important things. That is the first part of the journey, what we call the value creating paths of the enterprise. The second that we are talking about, that on this path where there are different paths in which the guy is operating on, or the people and the talent is operating on, what is the positively aligned talent life cycle that is required to be able to do talent management? Talent is not looking for charity. So it is not looking only for money. It is not looking only for a benevolence from you. It is looking for meaningful involvement, and it wants to contribute in these areas which are called the value creating paths or the value creating journey. Talent is looking for engagement in these areas, not in some activities which HR departments sometimes tend to conduct to say that we have a family day out and they believe, we have created a high-spirited cricket event or some, what's that sing-song event called Antakshari with the family and all. And we mistake activity to be engagement for the people. Actually, talent is requiring or expecting engagement in the value creation journey of the enterprise. Now, what is the positively aligned talent life cycle that we are talking about? Times out of number, we believe that acquiring the right talent is the end of the journey. And that's where we fail. We give all kind of value propositions to people, and then when people believe you and join the company, we find that the delivery of the value propositions don't happen at all. Now, actually, the organization's positively aligned talent life cycle includes 5 parts. And let me put it on the screen as I'll try and show it to you. The 5 parts are, look at it this way. The first is the talent. No, the first is the talent acquisition part of it. And of course, acquiring the right talent is very, very important. But if you believe that the journey ends there, that's where you fail out, because people will not feel. So for effective talent aligned life cycle, you require 5 things. Number 1 is talent acquisition. Number 2 is talent alignment. Number 3 is talent engagement. Number 4 is motivation. And 5th is appropriate measurements. Now, unless and until the organization has its ecosystem of managing the talent resources positively in place, either people will get disconnected, because see, the second part of it on the screen is connection through alignment. When people are not connected or not aligned, they will not understand the vision well, they will not understand mission well, they will not understand strategy, they will not have values, they will not have leadership traits, they will not understand the performance of the organization, feel alienated, and therefore cannot perform. Therefore, the positive talent life cycle needs to be aligned and managed well. No amount of talent present in the organization, which is of a high caliber talent, can by itself deliver anything unless and until there is a positive path of the talent life cycle, which involves connection, which involves engagement, which involves motivation, and which involves measurement. And that's the kind of, the 2 parts which are critical. Most organizations tend to believe that their employee engagement activities would mean taking a report from some survey that is conducted by some agency, which says that, okay, where do people feel disaligned? And wherever there are those high scores or low scores, you tend to identify domains of low score. And then on the domains of low score, you then say, okay, so what are the activities we need to be putting in place to ensure that these scores will go high? But that's a very, very, very raw way of looking at it. You need to get much deeper. Whilst of course it is very critical to keep things as simple as possible, but there are certain organizational complex problems. In our desire to find simple solutions, we should the entire detailing that is required to get into the organizational crevices to be able to understand what is connection, where does the employee get connected to the organization, where does he get engaged, what are the engaging domains, and what are the paths for doing positive engagement with people on the value creation journey. So this concept talks about these 2 things, Kashish.
Right. So when a talent does get disengaged and subsequently disconnected, I think most of us would not be aware about the difference between talent disconnection and disengagement. Would you please enlighten us on these 2 phrases?
Okay, let me go back. I thought I explained that point, but let me labor to explain. Let me go back. Okay, let me go back. Let me go back to the, look at this. Now, no, yeah. So look at this. The 2 expectations are connection with the strategy. And what are the activities that go into connection with the strategy? We said it's alignment with purpose, participation in strategy, involvement in the planning process, communication of the enterprise ongoing performance, invitation to solve larger problems, etc., etc. Now, once if you are being treated as a superhero talent of your department, but still nothing else happens to connect you or align you with the larger enterprise strategy or larger enterprise processes, you will feel disconnected. Once you feel disconnected, then your search for connection goes higher and higher. And therefore, if your enterprise does not have processes, and most organizations tend to miss out because they believe you need to have information only on a need-to-know basis. Particularly poor HR departments, when the business planning processes are going on in the enterprise, are told to make presentation on some HR numbers and recruitment, and that's where it ends. They don't really want to know what is engagement. They don't want to know what is connection, because the focus is only on the imaginary belief that the enterprise will deliver values without people being engaged or without people being connected with the strategy. So unfortunate. possibly we have not been able to, as a community, develop a suitable amount of appreciation in our business brothers to be able to understand that unless there is connection with the strategy and unless there is a meaningful engagement in the value creation journey, people will not be able to deliver value. And if they will attrite, there will be a talent recession. And if there is talent recession, no business, with however fantastic the business plans are, can deliver value. Kashish, that's my thought on it.
Right. Thank you so much. So, talent disconnection and disengagement are do happen frequently in organizations where HR or the organization is not able to keep up with the pace of the
So, Ashish, let me disturb you for a minute. In fact, I believe that talent connection and talent engagement are not HR agendas.
their organizational agendas. True.
They are the agenda of the CEO and should be actively supervised by the board. Because imagine this, the board is created for the pure purposes of ensuring that the investors and the shareholders and stakeholders' value is protected. Now, when the business plans are being approved, what are they approving the business plan unless and until they try to find out that the people creating value, and people are the only factor of value creation that creates value, if that factor of value creation is disengaged or disconnected, no amount of fantastic business plans that have been presented and approved by the board will be delivered. So it is going to be actually a misgiving to the shareholders to say we will create value when actually the prime resource is neither engaged nor connected, and therefore the chances of that value being created is only on the paper which is presented to the board.
Right. So, what are actually the organizational consequences of disconnection and disengagement? And can the after effects of these be reversed later once the negative impact of these have set in?
So number one, let's understand that when you're dealing with people, a lot of these elements are perception elements. So how people within the organization perceive. So when, what happens when the stock market falls, suddenly it may be a temporary fall because of some distant butterfly effect happening, and then suddenly the markets start falling. And everyone who doesn't even understand when the market falls tends to start selling stocks, and the entire collapse is a ripple effect of the whole small butterfly which was flying somewhere in Amazon. Likewise, when critical talent starts leaving the enterprise, the butterfly effect of this is that there is a certain element of negativity that builds into the organization. And people who are not even impacted, seeing some good people leave, tend to believe that there is something larger wrong in the system, which possibly they don't understand, and then tend to lead. Tend to leave the organization. Around this time, naturally, the entire negative process is working. So there is a huge amount of gossip mongering that happens in that organization about some larger things being wrong, and how the huge consequences of these would be much bigger than what they are able to see. So there is a certain element of nervousness that comes into the organization. And as a consequence of that nervousness, a domino effect of talent recession happens. And once the talent recession happens, all the king's horses and all the king's men, Kashish, cannot put that Humpty Dumpty back again. For that Humpty Dumpty to be brought up again, there will have to be a huge cost to doing it. And therefore you can do it, and of course you can redefine, and of course you can create reconnection, and of course you can put engagement processes in place. But the cost of doing that and the time it takes to redo that is very, very long, because the perception has become negative. And to change that perception takes a huge time.
Right, and a lot is lost during that time. Totally with you, sir, on this.
Right.
So thank you so much for sharing your experience. And we have our webinar attendees with us, and questions have been pouring in. So wondering that millennials would soon be constituting for 35% of the global workforce, which is by 2020. How can talent succession be planned for millennials, Generation X, and Generation Y employees as a comprehensive workforce?
So look, a multi-generational workforce is a reality, and it's not a reality only for India, but for all global companies, multi-generational workforce is a reality. Now, depending on the organization, and of course, there are no cookie cutter plans for, this is the formula on the basis of which you could do that. But predominantly talent that is required for the coming generations, particularly when you're talking about the digital times, particularly when you're talking about blockchains becoming realities, particularly when possibility of cryptocurrency is becoming a reality of the economic transaction, particularly when robotics, holograms, particular intelligence is going to be the way forward value creating process of the enterprise. That times succession planning will have to be done far more differently than what has been done in the past generations. I commonly say my most favorite statement that you cannot win wars of the future by using weapons of yesterday. And therefore, the succession planning will have to be short. Long run is going to become very, very difficult and very difficult to predict. Therefore, the predictability becomes a very, very critical element. And therefore, depending on how your value chain will get impacted, your succession planning processes will have to be looked different.
Very true, sir. So the next question that we have is from Prabodh Sirur, sir. So he says, he is asking, what is the one most powerful action we should take up so the learning today is implemented in our day-to-day jobs?
So the one most important, and of course, to ask me to tell you one most important, give me a minute's time to think. I would say creating a learning environment. Because you see, there is no one best knowledge, there is no one best skill, there is no one best tool, there is no one best application that you can think of which will forever and ever be in continuous use. So if you were to build that one unique capability in the organization, which will serve you for the longest period of time, I would say create a learning environment and build the capability to be effective learners in the people resources and particularly the talent resources of your enterprise.
Right. So the next question is from Deepak Sharma, Deepak sir. He says, should the talent management be individualized or standardized in the current working environments?
Oh, my friend Deepak is also there. That's great. Hi, Deepak. So, as I already labored this, that there is always this balance you will have to maintain in an enterprise of how much of socialization and how much of differentiation you need to give. But talent certainly expects a differentiated treatment. It certainly expects to let others know that it is doing very well, to expect that talent is something which is so much of what would one say? It is so evolved that it does not want to be differentiated. It wants to be treated like everyone else, despite being a high performer or high delivery resource in the organization. I think my understanding of people and their psychology as of now doesn't tell me that they really don't want to be differentiated. Now, the consequence of differentiations are very, very high, and therefore organizations tend to socialize. But do people who are talented people, or does talent expect differentiation? Yes, the answer is yes. They expect differentiation.
Right. So the next question is from Veer Bharat, and he says, correlation between employee engagement and the manager relationship is very, very striking. How should organizations take
What's the question? The correlationship between?
So he says correlation between employee engagement and the manager relationship is striking. So how organization should take the issue and perform well with their manager and make this entire uh, relationship work?
So manager is the first line of engagement and connection. So whilst we are talking about engagement and connection at a larger universal organization level, but the first level of disengagement and the first level of disconnection is experienced by a person in an organization with his first line of manager. His supervisor is the organization. To anyone who is top organization, all hierarchy is beginning with the person who is reporting into. To that person, that is top management. What is top management? Top management is your supervisor and everyone above him. For that supervisor who is top management, his manager and everyone above him. For that higher manager who is management, his reporting manager and people above him. So therefore, top management is a shifting concept. But whoever is your reporting manager is predominantly the person who is responsible for, number one, connection with the strategy and engagement with the processes. And therefore, it is very, very important that the entire hierarchy of leadership and management should be aligned, trained, coached to ensure that they are able to engage with people, they are able to create engagement of people with the processes, and they are able to build the connection with the strategy, the business plan, the performance progresses of the larger organization, so that people don't get disconnected or they don't get disengaged.
Right. The next question is from Partho Ganguly, and he asks, how do you effectively engage talent, or are we right in expecting engagement from talent themselves?
So when nothing happens by magic, unless of course talent is self-motivated, and sometimes we do find that talent is self-motivated because the entire organization has no structured processes for talent engagement or talent connection, and yet despite that universe being so not offering these talent engagement activities or talent connection processes, yet you will find that there are some people who are very engaged and who are very connected. So how did they become self-engaged, or how did they become self-connected? So whilst there may be many other factors which one would have to do a little bit of micro-analysis into the behaviors of these people, but if the organization doesn't have it, and if it is a lottery in terms of talent being engaged and talent being connected despite no processes being present in the company, well, it cannot say that that is the model it will use, because their ability to replicate future chains of management on the basis of that process is not there. So if you don't put the seed, you can't expect the tree. But there are certain trees which grow, God knows who put the seeds in, and then you find that the tree grows in the garden. You may have not put the seed, but somewhere the seed was there. So you have to do a little bit of analysis, but you can't say that with incomplete processes you will be able to run engaged people and future leaders can be created without doing planned activities in the organization. You will have to make the leadership journeys, you will have to make the leadership interventions, you will have to nurture talent, you will have to coach people, you will have to build a learning environment.
Thank you so much for answering the question. The next one is a very interesting one coming from Anupama Swaroop. And she asks, in the digital era that we are in, how do we really keep talent motivated considering the VUCA world?
So why is VUCA world? Because talent digitalization is an outcome of the VUCA world. So how are the two contradicting each other? So number one is, let's understand that predominantly in the changing environment, your ability to constantly change, because the new changes that we are talking about, in fact, I was reading a beautiful article which was saying that there is not going to be any Google by 2025. I don't know how much it is true and not, but I was certainly reading that article around 2 months ago. Now the question is that you ask someone, there is not going to be Google in 2025. This is such an amazing question, because from a today's perspective, we can't ever imagine a world without Google in 2025. Now the situation we believe is that the change that we have come through over a period of time, now that is the constant, and which is where the folly is lying. Even this change that you are talking about is going to continue to be changing, and changing at a pace much faster than the changes that we have experienced. Therefore, number one is that you will have to learn to be continuously flexible. That is the most important point. So at that point of time, you will have to look in to what are the elements that will motivate people in that change situation to maximize learning in a short period of time, and to be able to deliver value, and to be able to unlearn it and move to the next possible higher level at the fastest possible pace is what is going to be critical. Therefore, what are the motivators? It will have to be micro. So there cannot be cookie cutter offerings. It will have to be individual specific It will have to have an organizational context. It will have to be an environmental reality. So three things are important: environmental reality to determine what motivates, organizational processes that can say this is possible or this is not possible, an individualized program which says we cannot offer one size fit all solutions. For every individual, what motivates, we will have to find out that what motivates.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Next, the last question I have for this webinar, it is how can small scale companies build talent engagement and succession plan where finances, positions and growth opportunities are limited, they're very limited?
So, well, they will have to rework their value chains, because if they are sitting on talent, and let's understand, why does talent want to work in an organization? Just because it wants you to become from a small scale or large scale company? You want them to have that so-called those so-called sense of benevolence, that oh, they are willing to make those sacrifices so that you can become big, etc., etc., and there is no idea about what growth they will get out of it. So if medium and small scale sectors are sitting on talent and they critically need talent, then they will have to learn to find out ways of motivating them, growing them, etc., etc., because constantly the larger companies will be looking out for talent, and in the hyper race of talent, it will be easier for them to look at the talented people in small scale sectors, and because they will be able to bring them into the boards of the on the board of the large companies by giving very, very small increases as compared to the cost of getting talent from another large company. So in fact, the challenge for the smaller companies is a very dual challenge. On the one hand, their ability to invest in talent is very, very challenged, because they don't have that kind of spare money. They don't have ability to invest in refined, sophisticated processes on the one hand. And on the other hand, their talent will be most attractive and easy to take away, because larger companies will see them as potential talent and will pay them small increases, which will be large compared to what they're earning in their small companies, and be able to take away that talent. Now, therefore, they will require help. If they don't know how to do it, they will require external help to design internal programs which will help them to retain talent, which is not necessarily high cost. It is a folly to believe that retaining and developing talent requires huge investments. It requires processes, but does not necessarily require high cost investments to do that.
Thank you so much for answering that question. Would you be able to spare another 2 minutes? There's a very fantastic question that's come our way, and I promise this will be the last one. So it is from Srinath Gururaj Rao, and he says, thanks for the wonderful insights, Adil. What are the modes in which engagement can be effectively driven when organizations go through disruptive business models? I think it'll be similar to the VUCA world question that we just took up.
No, so what's the question? Let's come to the grip of the question.
Right. He says, what are the modes
through disruptive business models as a result?
So no, he says, what are the modes in which we can drive the engagement effectively, considering the organization is currently going through disruptive business models?
So the most important thing is that the greatest blunder is for people to believe that there is a disruptive model and CAM is going to follow this disruptive model once it settles down. What people don't really seem to understand is that this is the nature of the animal of the future markets. They are going to continuously be disruptive. So disruptive is a reality. It has not happened in this particular episode, or in say, this is not episodal. It is going to be a continuously disruptive world. In that continuously disruptive world, they will have to be creative. Leadership will have to be creative to be able to identify where talent finds its role in that disruptive reality, and what will motivate it, what kind of leadership will be required. Therefore, how do they develop that leadership which will have a meaningful growth and career alternatives in that disruptive environment, which is a reality which you will have to continuously face.
Right. Thank you so much for letting us pick your brains on such these entire list of questions, and the entire discussion that we had with you was very, very insightful. And I'm sure the attendees, as well as the entire team, will benefit a lot from this entire discussion. And we would be able to utilize it in the organizations and improve the engagement levels. And I'm sure it'll end up reducing the attrition, some bit of it as a result. So I think some of the
Hope it
concepts
does.
discussed here were very new. Some of the um, concepts were very enlightening, and I'm sure they'll be the same for the group members too. And it was amazing to see how the talent engagement is affected, and the talent disengagement and talent the recession is affected by different concepts. So I
The
hope
word you were using with is talent disconnection.
that, yes, talent disconnection is eventually affected and leads to talent recession. So I hope we as HR professionals and other business leaders which are onto this platform, we're able to leverage this entire stream of thoughts and concepts. And I think it totally depends on us how we align it to the businesses, align it with the senior management, and take it forward. I do see a huge potential how we can map the benefits from this webinar to those of the organizations. So thank you so much for sparing your valuable time. And I would also like to thank everyone who's attending this webinar for your enthusiastic questions, the participation, your patience while you waited. Thank you for the patience, your patience as well, Adil. It was really fantastic. And the queries that came along, and we have the weekend ahead, so we'll all will have some bit of time to mull over the entire session today. And I hope Monday will bring along some new, applications where PHR professionals will feel that they're able to implement some of the concepts. So I would also like to thank the core HRIR team, which comprises of Veer, Bhanu, Jyoti, Anu, and Kirti, and this time especially Rahul Khandelwal pitched in to help us out with the registration process. So thank you, everyone. Thank you, Adil sir, for sparing your valuable time. I hope everyone has a great weekend. Thank you so much. Have a
And
good.
thank you, Kashish, for inviting me. And should anyone have any questions, do get back to me on LinkedIn. I'll answer all your queries.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.